Excellent. All right, the time is 6:17 and we are calling the Kyle Housing Authority meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Garza,
Here.
Armstrong,
Here.
Orgish.
All right, great.
Here.
All present. Our first item is to approve the minutes. This is consider the approval of the Kyle Housing Authority June 18th and July 29th regular meeting minutes. Do we have anyone
I'll
who would
make a
like to
motion
move?
to approve.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
Great. All in favor? Aye. All right, motion approved. Now we move on to our citizen comment period with Kyle Housing Authority. Do we have any? No. Okay, great. Then we will go ahead and close our citizen comment period and move on to our staff reports and presentations. We will be looking at a report, holding a discussion, providing staff feedback on overview of the Charles Young property.
Hello. Okay. So Michael Roth with the Housing Authority of the City of Austin is going to present both the overview of Charles Young and then the overview of Pete Dressen. We'll take them sequentially and have plenty of time to dig into both of the properties and answer all of our questions. I think Adrian's going to bring it up. Okay, it's up.
There we go. Well, good evening again, Commissioners. I'm Michael Roth from the Housing Authority of the City of Austin. I'm function as the Vice President of Pathways Asset Management for the Housing Authority. And what we're going to cover here tonight is an overview of both properties. In your board packets, you had a lot of this information kind of side by side, and sometimes that's helpful to look at it side by side to see the differences. We're going to present them as each property separate and then kind of go through them that way. But I think it's helpful because while the Housing Authority is small in the sense of 2 properties and 51 units, having 2 completely different programs does add a layer of complexity. And so looking at it that way can be helpful. So running through the first one, Charles Young is the property that is part of the traditional HUD public housing program. Public housing this goes back to the 1937 Housing Act, and it functions out of the HUD division of the Public and Indian Housing, often referred to as just PIH. And the important thing to note here is the next one on the contracts. Public housing functions on an annual contributions contract, an annual ACC, meaning that every year it is subject to HUD appropriations and government and congressional appropriations, and every year the prorations can vary the amount of subsidy that ends up in coming to the property. And that is a significant difference from the Pete Dressen property, which we'll talk about in a moment. With the public housing program, HUD is interacting directly with the Housing Authority as the operating agent. Normally there's no intermediary private owner. The Housing Authority is functioning in that role and HUD working directly with them. Public housing then funds the program through 2 different sources. First is through the operating fund, which covers costs related to operations of the property. And there is a long list of eligible criteria and eligible expenses. We're not going to get into that level of depth in that, but one of the other documents that was provided did provide more information about what are considered eligible expenses. The capital fund is a separate funding program as well that provides for cost-related capital improvements for the ongoing operations of the property. Things like replacing your roofs, replacing all of your appliances or flooring, things that are going to be property-wide large expenses. The other thing that is unique and different about public housing is that there is no direct, from Pete Dressen, money is sent directly from HUD to the property. Here in public housing, everything operates through the electronic line of credit control system, ELOCS. And the authority then goes into the system and draws down funds as the money is needed. So it is not tied to like contract rents. It's not tied to that. It's tied to the subsidy that's allotted to the property for the year. And that changes on an annual basis every year on January 1st.
Who has access to this?
Currently, the interim executive director has access at this moment in time. And then when we determine some of the financial structure of all this, whoever your financial officer would be the person that you'd really want to have having access to this.
Does the money sit in there like a pot of money with interest?
Not with interest.
It just sits in there.
It just sits in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Subsidy determination. Public housing is very complex. And I think that one of the key elements to kind of highlight it is that it is not based on current information. It's based on historical information. And what I mean by that is that the primary basis for starting the funding for public housing on January 1st of every year, they go back 18 months and calculate 12 consecutive months from that start date of your occupancy rate. So for January 1, 2025, they were looking at the occupancy of the property from July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. And that's what's determined, one of the big factors in determining the subsidy for the property starting January 1, 2025. So, we're locked in, and we're already halfway locked in for next year's subsidy based on our occupancy rates at the properties. And they get that information through a system called PIC, and in which the authority is sending information and data to HUD to let them know what the occupancy, who's there at any point in time in each individual unit. So they're doing that calculation retroactively. Subsidy increases then are based on that formula, but then also subject, as I mentioned, to prorations by the federal government as Congress appropriates money on an annual basis through HUD and the various bills and the budgets or continuing resolutions or whatever mechanism they're using at the time to fund the federal government. They will then, based on that, give a proration saying, well, if we funded it to HUD to be this much, if that's all we have to fund, you're only going to get 90% of what it takes to operate the property, or 95%, or 98%. But you don't know what that percentage is going to be until they actually approve a budget or pass a continuing resolution. And so while the federal government's budget year does start October 1, they don't always have a budget in place October 1. And so you don't know always on exactly what it's going to be. Okay, and that's one of the challenges of public housing is your funding sources are constantly changing every year. Same source, but the amounts can change.
Do you know the reasoning behind doing it a year and a half in a
I'm not really sure. My guess is just when they first started this, it was time that they needed to process. They needed the 6 months to process all of that, and they were trying to get it in before that 10-1 budget start year, and I think that's what it is, but I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
And Michael, can you talk a little bit about fair market rent and what that means and how it's calculated? And
So fair market rent is, HUD publishes fair market rents on an annual basis across the country, and it's broken down into areas, which can be large or small. And what I mean by that is fair market rents exist for an area ranging from Round Rock all the way down to San Marcos as one area for fair market rents. But then it also break down in larger cities, which they do in Austin, and they do in Dallas and San Antonio and Houston, by zip code. So I would be surprised if they do it by zip code down here in Kyle.
yeah,
I don't know that for a fact, but I would be very surprised if they do, because they tend to only do it in larger metro areas. And they do it that way because it tends to be very beneficial for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is another separate HUD program. But that is a factor that is calculated in this as well in determining how much subsidy is coming to the property. So you are lumped in with that larger metro area of Round Rock all the way down to San Marcos, which in some ways can be beneficial because that can generate some higher fair market rents. And the goal is to keep it, the number they're using is 80% of that fair market rents. That doesn't mean that's what your subsidy is going to be. I want to be really honest with that. Our subsidy in public housing was closer to about 60 or 55% of the fair market rents.
And as we're looking at, for the city of Kyle, as we're looking at doing our housing plan and working with the consultant that we've hired to do that, one of the things that we've asked him to look at is knowing that we're lumped in a fair market rent for a very large area, just like our rental levels or our MFI levels or area median income levels, AMI levels are inclusive of that very large area because we're within the Austin, tables and metro areas, and we that's what everybody bases our affordability on for federal programs. I've asked him to look at what would be a fair market rent really for Kyle, so we know kind of what the difference is. It may not affect the federal programs that we have, but it's an information piece that's really important to us to know for anything that the Housing Authority might choose to look into that is outside of what is funded by the federal government.
And that's like from the presentation that we saw last time, correct?
Well, it's the same gentleman, that's
Okay.
of SSR with Housing Works of Austin, who is working on the housing study. FMR was not included in what we talked about at that meeting because he was just giving a big general overview. But we did talk about at that last meeting is the idea that generally speaking, if you look at what the area median income is in Austin, you would have to drop it about 20% to get to what we would consider the area median income in Kyle.
Okay,
Roughly. Rule of thumb. Really big rule of thumb.
okay, thanks.
For the ELOCs, and that's where we get the one budget, right?
Yeah.
Is our goal to zero out every fiscal year?
So the reality is on the operating fund, you will, just because you're going to need all that money to operate the properties. On the capital fund, you do not have to zero it out every year. You have 4 years to fully expend the money, but they must be obligated within 2 years. So you may have a project, for example, if you're doing a large renovation that may take 6 months to complete, as long as it's obligated by that 2-year mark, if you don't complete it and pay it all out for another 6 months or so, that's okay, that money's still there for you. And when we looked in it, there is money left in the capital fund for Charles Young for 2024 and 2025.
And that
At
was
this moment.
around roughly 50 to 55,000 is what
Each
was in
year.
each year was in the capital fund. So we're taking that into consideration as we're looking at slowly putting together, and this is kind of bleeding. A lot of the items today on the agenda kind of all bleed into other items. But we just got this week what we would consider a budget or a capital budget from MDP for what they were anticipating to spend on the units and on the 2 properties. And so we're trying to work our way through that and to understand how they were intending to fund all of that, because it's considerably more. I think they were counting on the revenue from some of the projects that were canceled. And I think they've talked about that with residents. And so we're going to have to understand what has been promised and what we can realistically do and how to prioritize. And we'll talk about the major investment that we have going on right now is at Pete Dressen. And so we'll talk about that in the next, and when we dig into that, there's ongoing work that's happening out there.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
So if the property management has projects that they've earmarked to do they do like a request for an RFP or whatever? Like,
So they should. All of
Okay.
this is being done, especially with anything that's expending the capital fund. Those are federal dollars, and there are very strict regulations on how you spend federal dollars. Some of the work that's happening at Pete Dressen is funding that is not necessarily being funneled through the federal government because it's coming from proceeds associated with the Opal Point deal that we're still unpacking. And so there might be slightly less regulations on that, but I don't know that I would ever recommend that we do anything less than what you would do with federal dollars to ensure that we are appropriately expending funds on behalf of the Housing Authority. What I can tell you we don't have right now for the agency is an actual procurement policy. I have asked multiple times, and what I've gotten from the previous property manager is not a process that adheres to what I would expect it to. So that will be part of what we're going to be working on over the next couple of months to get, kind of organizationally, what kind of structure do we need to have for the properties to ensure that we're complying with all of the things that we need to comply with.
thanks.
The next thing talks about for residents, when they're living at the property, what do they pay? So the subsidy in public housing, you're gonna get the same amount of subsidy every month for that calendar year based on the previous occupancy, plus what residents pay. And residents will pay 30% of their household income minus various eligible deductions that they may qualify for, deductions for dependents or disability, things of that nature. Or they can pay that or a flat rent amount, which every year needs to be established at no less than 80% of the fair market rents. So if 30% of my income is higher than that, I could choose the flat rent and just have it essentially be capped there and not have to pay more. But majority of them are not at that level in this program. Okay. The key policy document for public housing is an admissions and continued occupancy policy that every property and every housing authority should have. And again, as I mentioned before, PIC is the reporting system. All the data, all that when I say all, I mean everything. Names, birth dates, social security numbers, how many children, everything about your job, every asset that you have is all reported back to HUD through that system. It is very, very invasive in that sense that they know an awful lot about you and there's a lot of information that is transmitted back to HUD. Because it's all used in calculating their rent portion, so they have all that data available to them. And families then must recertify and recalculate, provide documentation every year of their annual income so that once a year that income gets recalculated and their rent is redetermined. If they have major changes in their income between those annual recertifications, they can report that to the office. If it's a decrease, they lost a job, they were required to recalculate their rent and their rent goes down the next month. If it's an increase, the housing authority has a choice on whether or not to do that. Based on policy, they can say we don't do any increases or only increases over a certain threshold. There's a flexibility within the public housing program on that front.
And that's all contained in the admissions and continued occupancy policy.
Correct.
That does not exist.
Currently. Yes. So just some information about the physical property profile. Currently, there are 20 occupied units. There's one vacant unit for a total of 21 units at the property. And there's some pictures that'll be here as part of this. These are older pictures, but they're very representative of what the property does look like.
Do we have a queue, like a waiting?
We do have a waiting list,
Waiting
and I do not know the number on the waiting list for each property, but there is a waiting list for each property, yes. Currently, at Charles Young, there are 11 one-bedroom apartments, 6 two-bedroom apartments, and 4 three-bedroom apartments, making up the full 21. And the size of the apartments, about 510 square feet up to 790 square feet, depending on the number of bedrooms in the apartment.
And is that determined by family size?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and again, that within your ACOP or continued occupancy policy, you have your admission standards and your occupancy standards that you set. So one thing you always want to be looking at is what are the occupancy standards required within the city, because you don't want to be out of compliance with the city. But also then, and typically it's considered 2 people per bedroom. And then you can make exceptions, for example, married couples or children of opposite sexes over certain ages. That all gets written into your policy and how you want to handle that. There's flexibility on that to a certain degree. So currently, among the current residents at the property, 30% of their income, the amount that they are paying in rent, for the one-bedroom families, the average is about $270 per household that they are paying in rent. For our two-bedroom families, the average is $196 per month. And for our three-bedroom families, it's $209 per month. So this is the money that we're collecting in addition to what we get from HUD through the ELOCs and the operating fund. So about two and a half weeks ago, we did send 3 of our staff from the Housing Authority of the City of Austin down to do 100% inspection of all the units at Charles Young. And we looked at this from 3 different perspectives. First of all, the people we sent were our inspection manager, one of our lead maintenance, and one of our community directors to be able to help with the interaction with residents while we're doing all of this as well. And we looked at it from three perspectives. First, just physical conditions. If anything's broken or damaged, we wanted to make note of it. Second was HUD's inspection standard, which is called INSPIRE, which is a fancy way of saying it stands for National Standards for the Physical Inspection of Real Estate, which is when HUD comes out to do a physical inspection of the property, that's the standard they're using. So anything that would be a deficiency in that standard, we noted that. And then just things that fall under kind of resident care of the unit, the cleanliness and other things of that nature, which can have an impact on the physical well-being of the property. So based on that, we inspected the full 20 occupied units, identified a total of 357 items with an average of about 18 items per unit. And on the surface, that's going to sound like an awful lot. I want to say a couple things. A lot of them are very small things, even very manageable. It's also not out of line for the age of the property. I mean, these properties are 50 plus years old. And so when you get to properties of that age, this is not at all surprising. And knowing that the previous history on inspections, the scores had been decent in the last round, again, this is not something that's not manageable. The breakdown of that, though, looks like this: electrical being one of the largest items. We did find that just about every unit of the property had some type of electrical issue. Not an electrical issue that rises to the level of fire threat, but electrical issue that does require being fixed. And they are prioritizing some of these things already. When I was stopped the property this afternoon, the maintenance gentleman who was there working today came in having just finished rewiring one of the units, because a lot of the outlets, what they were finding was the wires were reversed. So, which is a fairly simple fix, but it's a fix that needs to be made, and it takes a little bit of time. Plumbing was, to me, is more of a concern, just because water leaks can cause other damage. Water leaks can lead to mold. Water leaks can lead to rot and other things that are kind of more significant. And so those are being prioritized as well by the maintenance. When you look at appliances, none of the appliances were not functioning. When I say there were 26 deficiencies, it was things like a single burner on the stove was not working, or the light in the microwave wasn't working, or other things, but there were no instances of an appliance that was not functioning entirely. Residents had functioning appliances. So the other one that did highlight, and they are focusing on as well, is that one on HVAC, mold and mildew, because left unattended, that can grow into a much larger problem. So that's being addressed at the property right now. The currently Asset Management Professionals, AMP, the management company that's there, is doing a full file review of all the files. And they basically finding that the files are in good order. There are some issues, in particular, as we mentioned, that we don't have an ACOP, so that we don't have a guiding policy document. They've been using the policy documents from the other program and the other property, which are very similar. They're not going to be terribly out of line, but it is an issue that needs to be addressed. And we determined earlier this week as well, looked and picked that the submissions to HUD, it's not that they didn't happen, it's just that they didn't get through. I believe that they were doing them, but there was a disconnect, that the system at HUD was not actually receiving it. So they did not receive, nothing has been received by HUD since October of 2023. And so we've been working with the previous management company to get that corrected, with the target date of Monday being the date to have that addressed and resolved.
How does that happen without HUD notifying us?
That's a great question.
It's a question that we have on a very long list of questions to ask HUD when we talk to them, because when we noticed it, our HUD rep was surprised, because they had, the previous property managers had been responsive. They weren't, they weren't overly concerned with the activity from the HUD perspective. And when we looked in the system together to see that, she's like, wow, that doesn't seem right. And so we went and talked to MDP, and when we were we talked to the person who was actually filing them. She's like, well, I was following the step-by-step that HUD gave me, and they never told me it wasn't going through. So we're gonna have to recreate some of the history, but the history, I mean, not recreate
Yeah.
in that all of the documentation exists. If you go
Correct.
through the physical files, there's a 558 form that HUD has that you're supposed to have for every time someone changes over in a unit, right? As an example. We have all of those going back
Full time.
through the
We have
whole
all that's
history
there.
of the property, even before the last, October of 2023. They're just not in HUD system. So we've got to figure out how to upload them and why that wasn't going through for that particular staff member.
And is there any sort of penalty for that?
At this moment in time, no. There is a short deadline to get it done because the fiscal year end for the authority was June 30th, and you have 2 months after that to get it done, which is August 31st, which is coming up very quickly. So, which is why the MDP was very committed to resolving this and committed to, reporting back to us on Monday, and with the anticipation that they would have it resolved.
Yeah, and if we need to, if that particular staff member at MTP who's really been fantastic, I mean, can't underscore that enough. She's been great. If she's not having success by Monday of figuring out why it's not populating, then we'll call HUD and we'll raise the bell or the
Exactly.
flag and get them to assist us. And I know we will get the assistance that we need to be able to meet that. The good news is we have all the information we need. We just have to figure out how to get it into the federal
Electronically.
systems that are, let's be honest, finicky at best. So it's,
If you need someone to, travel there and take off the things, I'm just saying.
you're busy.
When you say we, do you, because we reinstated the executive director
He's,
on interim basis,
he's
right?
not reinstated as the executive director.
Okay.
He's reinstated for the purpose of helping to proceed with pushing paperwork through the HUD systems.
Okay, so like
So
an-
more on like an administrator kind of role, not the executive director.
So there were
capacity.
things that weren't done, and I work for the government, so I know stuff is finicky, but if there was things that were not done accurately under his review,
Yeah,
are
yeah.
we paying him again to fix it?
I
And we may just have to, right? Because
I think we may just have to.
Okay.
First of all, we may just have to.
Yeah.
I don't think we are. The contract that we have with Mr. Colella and MDP is really nominal. It's like $1,000 a month for him to, and that's really more on the Pete Dressen side.
Okay.
That he'll have to do that kind of, the work that has to be done by him. On the public housing side, these are systems that I have readily available. I'm in all of them at this point. I don't have the knowledge to do it fast. And because MDP was the one who has all of the previous documentation and did them, and they just don't know why it didn't take, they're more than happy to help us get to the point
Yeah.
of compliance.
Okay.
So I'm very mindful of wanting to get our organization on strong footing so that we can operate, and we'll talk about that in one of our subsequent items. But what he's doing is pushing files through so that we can still get on the Pete Dressen side when we talk about that, so we can still get the funds from
Okay.
HUD to flow back to the property.
Cool, thanks.
Next. We'll move on to the Pete Dressen property here.
So Adrian will pull that up for us. Item number 3.
Thanks. Item number 3, receive a report, hold a discussion, provide staff feedback and overview of Pete Dressen property.
Okay. We're going to cover a lot of the same things, and we'll kind of be able to go through a little bit quicker here because we've had some of that background. This is part of the HUD's project-based rental assistance program, not public housing, which is in a completely different division at HUD. It's part of the Division of Housing, multifamily housing, under the statute, Section 8 of the Housing Act. Here, instead of an annual contributions contract, there is a 20-year housing assistance payment contract. So funding stability is a lot more stable than the public housing program. You have a 20-year contract. What I don't know, because I've not seen the contract yet, is what year that contract we're in. So we need to find that, get that contract, so we know exactly what year the contract we're in. If there's a renewal process at the end of the 20-year to sign another 20-year contract in the program. And this program is primarily focused at working with private owners. And in this, housing authorities can still do this, but we're really functioning as a private owner within this program in this situation. Instead of the complicated, retroactive subsidy issue, they use a voucher system. And there's a contract rent, and there's a resident portion, and there's a HUD portion, and on a monthly basis, the property submits a voucher saying, this is the amount of subsidy that we are billing, essentially, or invoicing to HUD for next month. And on the first of the month, HUD deposits the money in your bank account. So it's much more streamlined process than the public housing process. There's also a replacement reserve that's normally required. We have here a USDA loan on this property, so we'd have to look at the terms of the loan to find the actual replacement reserve. Instead of having a capital fund, there's a replacement reserve fund that's there. They don't use PIC, they use TRACS, a Tenant Rental Assistance Certification System. So again, two properties, but two completely different systems that we're operating in order to communicate with HUD. Subsidy determination, the housing assistance payment is equal to the contract rent minus the tenant's rent portion. It's a much more simple calculation. Subsidy increases in the PBRA program. HUD annually publishes an operations cost adjustment factor, an OCAF, for each state. So it is a statewide increase that is granted. There's nothing local about that. So for example, for the year 2025, the OCAF for the state of Texas was 5.4%. And so there's multiple components that go into determining that in every state, primarily looking at inflation relative to goods and services. But the OCAF then gets implemented on the contract, increasing your contract rents on the anniversary date of your contract. So using, for example, at our housing authority, a lot of our properties in this program have a December 1st anniversary date. So we have not yet implemented the 2025 OCAFs because we can't do that until December 1st. So whatever the month is for the anniversary date of the contract is when it becomes effective. Similarly, though, for residents, they pay 30% of their household income after eligible deductions, or the contract rent, whichever is lower. So they don't have a flat rent, but they have the contract rent, whichever one is lower. In PBRA, there's a HUD 4350.3 handbook, which is 760 some pages long, which sets out all the guidelines for the program and multiple other programs that live within the same Office of Housing at HUD. Properties then develop their own property tenant selection plan, which the Pete Dressen property has, and they contracted that out through a consultant who is someone that has worked with our agency, so I have high confidence in the quality and the compliance of the tenant selection plan for Pete Dressen. And other policy documents as needed, including the pet rules, house rules, et cetera. Also, in one item to mention, the PBRA program uses the HUD model lease, is required to use the HUD model lease. Public housing can create their own leases. So another area of freedom on the public housing side. Much like public housing, every household must recertify annually with recalculation of all of their income, their deductions, their assets, et cetera. However, there's no flexibility on making changes based on income changes throughout the year. It's written into the HUD model lease that any change of $200 or more per month must require a recalculation of your rent. So there's a little bit more paperwork on the PBRA side. Property profile, there are 30 units total, 29 are occupied, 1 is vacant at this time. We have 4 bedrooms, different sizes, so there's 4 one-bedroom units, 16 two-bedroom, 8 three-bedroom, and 2 four-bedroom units. You'll notice that the square footage is just a little bit larger than the Charles Young property at each bedroom size. And the contract rents, so this is where we're starting out with each apartment. All the one bedrooms, the contract rent is $1,055, all the way up to $1,632 for the 4 bedrooms. Currently, the resident portion of that is very similar to the Charles Young resident portions, between $185 The 4-bedroom is a little skewed with only 2 4-bedroom units. We have one household with a really high income, and so it kind of skews that number a little higher. But this is what we're collecting from residents, but that means that this is what we're collecting from HUD every month for those bedroom sizes. So we get significantly more revenue from the Pete Dressen property, not just because there's more units, but we get more money per unit at this property than at the Charles Young property.
And Michael, with the fact that we have 2 different programs, we're not, my understanding is, and I'm asking you to confirm this or tell me that I'm not correct, which is fine too, we can't mix funds from one property to the other. So if we have we have a more robust funding stream at Pete Dressen, that needs to go back into Pete Dressen. It cannot be used over to subsidize what's happening at Charles Young.
Correct.
But different pots. But the funding that the organization received from the close on Opal Point can be used however,
Yes.
because it is not tied to a federal program. Make
And
sense?
there also are additional rules that at some point in time, if you have a property that is cash flowing and at the end of the year there's a profit left over, at some point in time, that money then also does become free. I'm not the finance
Yeah,
person.
we're
on that.
probably not close to that.
Again, same slide. We sent our staff down to review the property. We inspected 20 of the 29 occupied units, found 332 deficiencies, which is fewer per unit, 11.4 on average, but very similar items. Again, similar electrical problems, similar plumbing, similar appliance issues. Really nothing that is different, significantly different between the 2 properties. Other than, I think you're just seeing that because Pete Dressen historically has had more money available to it, there's been more done at that property. And so the condition of the units is just a little bit better on the whole.
And do you want to talk about the work that's happening out there right now?
So yes, at the Pete Dressen, there is a contract that was already signed and approved by the previous board, and the contractor was ready to go. So we gave them go ahead to do that, to start that. They are working on an exterior project of all the units to remove the siding of all of the units, put on new siding, repair soffits and fascia, repaint all of it, fix any rot and they find underneath as well as they go throughout the process. So they have 3 buildings completely done. They're starting on phase 2, and when I stopped by there today, 3 more buildings are in process right now, 2 of which are pretty close to being done, and the 3rd one is just getting started. They still have another 10 units to get through for the whole property, 10 buildings to get through for the whole property.
Will that remediate any of the findings, deficiencies?
So if we go back real quick, you'll notice on the exterior, the last time that we just didn't look at the exterior of this property compared to the other ones. So we didn't pull out many things.
Okay.
We had only 4 things, and none of them were within the scope of work that we knew was already existing. Again, the physical file review is in pretty good order. We have less view into the system right now. We'll have to work on getting that, but we will do that. However, we know that money is still being deposited, so that's the good sign that process is still moving forward. That's everything that I have for the Pete Dressen property. As mentioned before, we did also receive from the previous management company that they had put together a capital plan that had included things like replacing all 30 HVAC units at Pete Dressen, replacing flooring at all 51 units, windows at all 51 units, cabinets, countertops, appliances at all 51 units, and various other projects as well based on security, fencing around all of it, playgrounds for kids, and so on and so forth. The estimated total, and it is just an estimate because there were not bids taken on this at this point in time, and I also want to state that there are no contracts at this point in time.
Other than the one that we talked about on the exterior at Pete Dressen.
Yeah, but the estimate was in a range of about 1.5 million to do all of that work.
Which without the funding stream of beyond Opal Point of those other 2 closings, I'm not sure we're going to have. And so we'll have to get a better understanding of what that looks like. I mean, these are still like game day bits of information that we're getting. But because of the lack of funding from the Strand and the other one, the Arden, I think, I don't know that we're going to have the amount of capital that would be required to fulfill those promises. And so that's going to be a hard conversation to figure out how to prioritize and what we need to do there. And so we'll continue to unpack. We'll talk about, I think, in the next item is the executive director report. So if you're okay, I can go ahead and just shift into that.
Can I ask one question?
Please.
Well, I might have a couple actually. Was the 1.5 million upgrade communicated to the residents?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if anything about the dollar amount, but some of the
Yeah.
items like
Okay.
playgrounds and
Yeah.
laundry equipment and HVAC, I think some of that, yes, we have heard from residents that has been communicated.
And
to
we
them.
heard that even at the resident meeting that we had.
Okay.
And that's probably, doubling so with the individual conversations that they had out of the property. We just didn't get confirmation of that, of what was reported until the last couple of days from
Okay.
MDP.
Got it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have, it's gonna be some hard choices that we'll have to make.
Thank you.
And does those decisions, does that come to us as the board to decide? Okay, based
So
on,
we'll talk through some of that. So the next item is the executive director report. You'll see this item get posted on all of the board agendas. I'm starting to frame out what the routine reports are gonna look like. I don't have, because a lot of what we've talked about already through the two properties that Mr. Roth went through will be things that we'll be talking about on a routine basis. But one of the things, I guess I need to go up there, sorry. I'm just realizing I don't have the ability to move things through, and I don't know that Adrian necessarily needs to put things through. So one of the things that we're gonna be bringing to you is, the more information on the financial condition of the housing authority in general. I can report that I confirmed with Broadway Bank that we do have access to the bank accounts, although I need to get on the phone with them for them to actually show me how to log in, because that's not doable from the information that I have right now. We will have to figure out, what we have from what we have in the bank and the capital, the capital fund that we have for Charles Young, and how we want to move forward on a reasonable improvement program for the properties, knowing what we have from the proceeds from Opal Point, how that has to cover the existing agreement that's already been that's being executed right now for the exterior renovations at Pete Dressen. So there's a lot of things that we need to try to tick and tie. We have a meeting set, or a series of meetings set with MDP to start really going through the financials to get a good understanding from them about what their budget was, what obligations currently exist for the housing authority along those lines. There isn't a public acknowledgement of that through board actions. We think because Michael and I were talking about this earlier, we think because they were the management company and not, that the housing authority board didn't necessarily have to approve an annual budget for the work that was happening under the agency. Obviously, I think that's something that we will be remedying and bringing a budget forward so that you have good transparency into what's going on. I think that's going to be really important. But we can't find record of the previous board approving any kind of a budget. So we're going to be trying to learn from what we can get from MDP, and then putting something together that we would bring forward to you guys, likely in September at that next meeting that we'll need to schedule. So we've talked about where we're at. I anticipate at the next meeting having a similar overview of the Opal Point deal. From what I can understand from talking to folks is it is in its very baby infancy. And so I don't think there's a lot of structure that exists. I asked the MDP staff member that we've been working with on some of the issues, what her interaction was and how that's structured, and she said it hadn't even gotten off the ground yet. So that may be something that we have to lift up off the ground and figure out what needs to happen for the role that the Housing Authority will be playing on that. So that will be an item for our September meeting.
We have a MOU with Opal Point or like a contract?
Yes, and yes. I have thousands of pages of documents on Opal Point that we're trying to digest. I've sent that to a real estate partner through the Housing Authority and in Austin to help me kind of make heads and tails of it. But that is fully executed with 1,000+ page set of closing documents.
Okay, because what I was thinking was if there aren't reporting, like, I'm assuming there's deliverables in there that say what they should be reporting to us.
I assume there are too,
Okay.
but that is,
I'd be curious to see, because I have thoughts in my head about what they should be reporting, and I'm curious what is actually in there.
we're all curious about that. We've even gone so far as to try to like go in to rent an apartment, and you get very, very, very far before you even have to submit your social, or up to the point where you're submitting a social and there is no discussion of income restriction or affordability. So these are, I think we have some foundational work that needs to happen with how that is going to operate in accordance with what the MOU states. That, again, is all the basis for lifting the property off the tax rolls.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll dig into that one. It's, but that one, again, not HUD managed or HUD governed. It's governed here. So we'll have to, it's more what you would consider just kind of classic income restricted affordable housing. But not probably launched to the point that we can really understand too much yet. Okay? So as we have our meetings every month, we'll run through, budget reports and things of that nature, and we're getting that built, and it'll continue to get refined over time. But that's what I had for the executive director report. So then item number 5 is the other item that I told you was going to get posted at all the meetings. And that's so that you guys have space in your meeting agenda to really ask any and all the questions, right? Recognizing that we're still new and we're rebuilding this organization. We will have lots to discuss every single week. I want to run through just a couple of things first. These are the trainings that have been identified that really would be probably required at this point after further conversation with folks for everyone to attend. These are all on-demand courses. I think all total, it's not more than a handful of hours for all of them. But I would like to just say that I'm going to use get everyone registered for all 3 of the courses, specifically for the protection of you guys and the organization as a whole, so that we can say, should anything come up, we've all had the same training for commissioners. As we think about bylaws moving forward, I was talking to Mike Gerber with the Housing Authority of Austin, and he said that they don't even let their new commissioners vote until they've gone through these trainings because they think it's that important. So I will get registration for everyone if it's agreeable. And then if we can have a commitment to get this done maybe over the next month or before the next meeting to get these trainings taken, I think that would be really helpful for the organization.
Do we need to vote or anything on that?
No,
Okay,
I
perfect.
don't think so. It's not structured as a vote. It's
Sweet.
just for us to get feedback and to have a conversation.
Okay, thanks.
So then in looking at the bylaws, these are things that I've noted that we need to shore up within the actual document itself. First is speaking about meeting cadence. I think the bylaws currently say that you guys meet once a year. Quarterly, with an annual meeting in July. We're gonna need to meet monthly for the foreseeable future. I think we're looking at, Melissa and Debbie, what is your preferred day with all of the other competing?
Wednesday or Thursday, and it would be the fourth week,
So Wednesdays of the fourth week of the month.
or Thursdays of the fourth. This room is available, let's be honest.
That is what we're going with. I might prefer Wednesdays just because there's a chance that, well, I know I'm gonna miss maybe the first, there's less holidays that are gonna impact it.
I'd say Wednesday.
Yeah,
Wednesdays,
work.
and is 6 o'clock a good time for everyone consistently?
As long as there's no
As long as
trains.
there are no trains.
As long, I
No,
can't
it's
control
still
that.
There, yes,
Is it still the?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
it has not moved.
yes.
Okay, so 6 o'clock on the fourth Wednesday.
So we'll put a little calendar together and send it out, so you guys can, mark it.
And so I'll note that when we, my hope is to get a draft of a new set of bylaws for consideration at September or the October meeting. One of the things that I think we will want to put in there, and these are in no priority order or any logical order really, is to require for future real estate deals that there's structured collaboration with the city of Kyle. That was lacking clearly previously. I don't quite know what that language looks like yet. That's the protection for the organization should something happen to all of the people that are here and we have an entirely new board in place. That will be a requirement that they'll have to do, right? And I don't know if that's going to be approval with the city council or if it's going to be working through administration within the city. I'm not quite sure what makes sense for that yet, but I do want to paper that structured collaboration. There's also just, our bylaws are very thin. And so we need to just create the additional structure to support the organization. I put in the posted backup that you guys can all access online, the bylaws of the Housing Authority of the City of Austin and Housing Authority of Travis County, trying to find the bylaws for Housing Authority of San Marcos, just to have some different examples from the big and small and all of them. Looking at Haka and Hatsi, they're structured pretty similarly, which tells me that that's not a bad way to structure it. They've got a lot of the same components. So we'll be working on pulling a draft together of that, stealing shamelessly from our friends across the land. There's no need to recreate any wheels, and bring something back either in September or October, depending on how things go.
Is there, oh, go ahead.
I will say, our new meeting date is not great for the week of Thanksgiving and the week of Christmas.
We'll figure that out.
So we'll figure that out.
It
We might have
works
to
for
do
the
this a week
September
out.
one, which is good because
And
that
October,
Thursday,
yeah,
I
and
will for sure be, or I'm 90% taking a kid to a college thing. So, stress.
Yes. Is there a statewide or like governmental-wide structure that we can also look at for the bylaws, or would you not recommend that?
Well, I mean, you can look at NARO, which is the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, and they probably have some guidance there. The 3 trainings that we're going to go to are offered by NARO and through NARO, and so that's obviously a good resource for us. And you guys might learn stuff through those trainings that would be helpful and informative. So I think that gives us time to kind of understand and digest and unpack what we would need to include in there.
Okay.
Do you guys, so then the last slide, it says open discussion. What questions do you have? What things that you're thinking about? The last item that we're going to talk about is the permanent what we want to move forward with with the next executive director or how we want to structure that. So before we go into that, if there's things that you're contemplating or questions that you have or things you want to bring information about or you want us to dig up information for you on, this is your opportunity to put it on the table and we'll either answer it or try to find a way to answer it.
Still no answer from Broadway Bank on our access, correct?
She's calling me tomorrow.
Cool. Great.
I was emailing earlier about this, how does the KHA know about any potential agreements the city of Kyle has made with developments with affordable housing? And are they using affordable housing in the same manner in which we are?
So the city has, through their development agreements process, and Melissa can speak to some of this, they have the ability to incentivize income restricted affordable housing. But they don't. But it's done in a little bit of a different way. The most common way is what you would see for Project Sahara, which is what you emailed me about, comes in the form of a low-income housing tax credit. With low-income housing tax credits, it's a federal program run through the state that either has 4%, which are non-competitive, and then 9% that are super competitive. And that tells you how, it's basically, how much money you're gonna get in tax credits to help offset the cost of that development and the running of that development. So the one that was briefed, there was a briefing at council last night is Project Sahara. They have indicated that that's a 4%, well, they didn't say 4%.
I'm
But
assuming, yeah.
I'm assuming it is,
Yeah.
but that's funded through a low-income housing tax credit, and so I'll have Melissa speak about that in just a second. But there's not, right now, there's no requirement on the city side to have any kind of conversation with the housing authority, but they're operating in two different kind of lanes, so to speak, because that's coming to the city as part of an overall development agreement for a particular tract of land.
Yeah, I was just going to say development in general, in relation to annexation and zoning and land use. So all of that's kind of coming together to really look at that entire development spectrum. And the city has entered into some of these agreements before for a couple other housing.
There are some low-income housing tax credit properties here within Kyle.
But that is also something that Housing Works is really going to outline in our housing plan too, is to really identify some of those tax credit housing that we do have, what other agreements have been done, and really kind of look at the bigger picture of kind of affordability that we have in this area. And then as he kind of highlighted last time, what is affordable for Kyle. So I do think it's really hard to get out of that metric to the AMI because that's what HUD uses. So I think you can continue to reference that, but instead of being 80% AMI, maybe it's 60% AMI because we know that's
there's for all of these properties and all of these deals, there has to be a certain threshold for it to be considered affordable. If it doesn't meet that threshold, then it's not a viable project, but they can always do more.
Yep.
And that's what we have the leverage on the city side of saying, hey, that's great. You only have to get to here, but we're asking you to go down to here. So we can extract the community benefit that way. Anybody that's wanting to do a development under a LIHTC deal has to go get a resolution of no objection from the governing body. So all of those have to go through council in some shape, form, or fashion. If it's a 9%, it's a very competitive process, and I don't think we have any 9% here in Kyle. I think they're probably all 4% because they wouldn't score to get a 9% this far south, is my guess.
Well, I think it would be helpful just hearing all of that, that's another alternative, right?
Not for, you don't have the ability to, as the housing authority, don't have, unless you were almost acting as the developer for a LIHTC.
To do a redevelopment of a property. It could.
Yeah.
Pete Dressen could.
Yes.
Pete Dressen could, Charles Young could not.
I guess maybe even I don't know, like a breakdown, like this is what this
Which program they're
authority-
under.
Yeah, basically what program is what, right? Because
Yep.
I saw that and obviously I'm new and still learning. I was like, I don't know whose lane that is. So it'd be helpful, I think, for us to
Sure.
just to have the breakdown of who can do what and what authority. And it sounds like what they were doing under low income tax credit housing, which would be different than our purview.
Correct.
Yep. Yes, and yes.
But
So I think Housing Works can absolutely kind of help us define the different lanes that are there and which programs are under, or which housing, if meeting affordability criteria is meeting which kind of different bucket, because you're right, they're different money buckets too, and they have different kind of affordability windows. So you saw like some of that LIHTC deals are 30 years. Usually those kind of loans are 30 years, and that's what they're done. And unless they reapply or do something else, that's the window that is too.
So as we're moving forward with the housing plan, we'll start having presentations at the city council and more public conversation about that, probably in the October timeframe. And so the October meeting might be a good meeting to set aside some time for them to come do, almost a public presentation with you guys as a primary stakeholder.
Yep.
And that's where we can get them to lay into some of these different kind of questions that we have. Just to be clear, I want to make sure that as we understand, if we ever, as a housing authority, wanted to redevelop a property like Pete Dressen, we could apply for low-income housing tax credits ourselves, right? But it's not, if someone was coming to us, as we did with Opal Point and folks were trying to do with the Strand and with Arden, they're not doing that under a low-income housing tax credit scenario. They're doing that to get a property tax exemption, where they're basically taking the whole property and lifting it up off the tax rolls so they no longer have to pay property taxes, which is a very significant benefit. It's a very costly benefit. And so we want to make sure that as we make those kind of decisions, we're making them with sound policy in concert with the city of Kyle, with the backing of, honestly, a housing plan or housing policy that council's adopted that says we have that kind of need, that we're willing to forego that property tax revenue to get this community benefit in the form of affordable housing, and what level it needs to be,
Well,
right?
that's really what I was thinking. It's like the level of need. If we're doing a bunch of projects, which we should have affordable housing, are we overdoing it if we don't know what each group is doing? So I think that would be helpful.
That's what we're going to hopefully get out of the housing study, because we're all shooting in the dark, right? We think we know things. What we know for sure is that, 80% in Austin is not 80% in Kyle, right? And that deals that are done under an Austin AMI or MFI, which you will hear used interchangeably. I tend to say MFI because that's how I was raised, but some people say AMI. But the deals done under the Austin AMI, MFI levels aren't necessarily going to be as valuable in Kyle, but still have pull the same weight for officially complying with the law, right? So it's all the balance. And we'll get to a point where we've got better understanding of what our mutual purpose is going to be towards meeting the needs of affordable housing. We're just not quite there yet. What other questions?
I do have one. I feel like I can never talk loud on this thing, but I did have one just regarding the repairs. Mold is such a big concern for me I know there's plumbing, there's electrical, but the mold itself, like I've just, there's kids in these residents. And so I guess my question is just, are there any existing partnerships with local nonprofit businesses or government agencies that we could leverage? I mean, I know we depend on HUD, but speaking, I guess, with HACA, like with experience, have y'all ever worked with outside agencies like Habitat for Humanity? I think there's one called Neighboring something. where we may be able to get the issues fixed by just getting our hands dirty?
So we work with Habitat and various other organizations for the city, but we've never really worked on a project specifically like that. And I don't have the knowledge of the local community here to know who the right entities are to recommend. But yes, we believe very strongly in working with any and every partner we can find in the community. We work with many agencies on it, and we do a lot of different things. We just have never actually done that particular one, but I think if there's someone out there who's willing to put that effort forward, I would encourage you to do that. Yeah.
And I would remind ourselves that our goal is for the residents of these two properties is that they have decent, safe, and sanitary housing, right? And so when we look at, 300 deficiencies here and 200 deficiencies there, we're gonna be making sure that the ones that are the highest priority get addressed first, and really getting the properties to a point where we can say they're decent, safe, and sanitary will come before we do things like that might be more cosmetic, right? So again, we're gonna have some hard choices to make. And we'll get there, but we're gonna have to, we also will definitely be prioritizing the welfare of the residents, and things like mold are clearly red flags. And that's gonna be evidenced through the triaging of the repairs that need to be made out there.
Thank
And
you.
they are already doing that. Many of these things have already been addressed and are already processed.
Okay, thank you.
We're not waiting to do that kind of work for anything. That's why we have the relationship with the Housing Authority for the City of Austin and their property management arm with AMP, so that we can address those as soon as, again, triage them, right? Highest priority is gonna go first, but that is ongoing right now.
When a resident submits a report of they have a need, anything, what does the process look like for that?
So they can give reports either in person, and a lot of them, especially folks at Charles Young, my understanding is that they're very comfortable walking to the property management office on Charles Young and just giving and it's, sometimes a good old fashioned piece of paper and that they fill out. And then we have staff that is employed by AMP that used to be employed by MDP and is now switched over to the other company, that will help to process that on the internal side to get that repair accomplished, or somebody to come out and look at it and whatever. There is a way to call those in as well, to my knowledge. And we don't have someone on site at Pete Dressen, and so my guess is that they're probably doing more of that than the physical piece of paper.
Okay.
But it's probably a little bit more manual than what you would see at, a new property that's opening up.
Okay. And then the funding for that, the staff is already employed, correct? But if they need to get parts or whatever, what does that look like?
So that is being handled through our property management company right now. If they need to swap out a switch or repair a toilet or replace something, then they're just working through that, and then that gets billed through the interlocal agreement between Housing Authority of Kyle and Housing Authority of the City of Austin. That's what our rent payments and the draws that we get from HUD and the vouchers are used theoretically to pay for, the general maintenance and upkeep of the properties.
Okay.
But how that all comes out in the wash and what it looks like as a per property draw and how that is balancing is forthcoming.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Anything else before I start talking about the last item, and then we'll go into executive session?
Oh, I do have one more.
Yes, of course.
And this might be for Michael Moore. I don't know if you had said in your presentation, when they are resubmitting for their annual certifications and stuff like that, what does that look like? Is that through the property management or? online?
No, it is also very manual right now. They come in for an appointment, and the annual review recertification appointment usually is about 45 minutes to an hour, filling out and answering all the same questions that they answered when they went through the admissions process, but then they have to provide the documentation to support it. So if they have a job, they're bringing in check stubs. If they're getting Social Security, then they're bringing in their award letter or whatever their source of income is, we've got to provide the documentation for it. And assets, X number of months of bank statements for checking accounts or savings accounts, whatever. HUD has the full guidance for anything imaginable, including that you own another home and are collecting rent on that is
Yes.
theoretically a source of income that you could provide as for all of this. So
Yeah.
there's that process.
And
takes
is
a
that
while.
done with the property management that's on site?
Correct.
Okay, so they have their own like files and paperwork on every resident? Okay.
Yeah. And
Is
that's the files that the AMP is currently auditing all of them, just to say that we're in good standing, in
Okay.
good shape with that. Yeah.
So when I worked in Iowa, we had just like the city housing authority and case managers there, and everyone came in and did their things there. Is that because it was a different type of program, or more or less efficient, or it's been many years, so I don't know if that's still a thing or not, but just curious.
So the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is a third different HUD housing program, frequently operates just the way you just described.
Gotcha.
And my guess is that may have been the program that you were part of there. And that typically is then operating out of a central office for the Housing Authority.
Gotcha.
Typically, project-based rental assistance and public housing, it's all done on the property since our staff is there and the residents are there, it's just easier as opposed to having them come to a central location.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Are we ready for
item number 6.
item number 6?
Item number 6. Okay, thank you, Adrian, in the back. So I've been having a lot of conversations with both the city manager and getting advice from the Housing Authority of the City of Austin about where we go for our next most immediate step with kind of getting this organization into a place where it's self-sufficient, right? And the strongest recommendation that I'm going to have right now is to maintain me as the interim executive director for, I'm going to say, probably through the end of the year, or maybe slightly longer. It's going to be fine. And that we prioritize hiring someone who will serve as a housing administrator. And this will be the person that will be able to, they won't be making the policies, they won't be working directly for you guys. I will be working directly for you guys. They'll be working for me. And they'll be the ones who will get access to all the federal systems and be able to push all the paper and kind of take over for what we've been asking MDP to continue to do. This isn't a full-time job. We're not hiring an employee. We're hiring a piece of a company that does this for a lot of other people that will have the knowledge to make sure that we're being steered in the right direction and getting all of the I's dotted and T's crossed with the federal systems, because there's a lot to that. I think you're probably looking at someone who would probably start at 15 to 20 hours a week for a person, and then would probably drop down to maybe more like a day a week or so once we're in a little bit more of a, production mode as opposed to build up and ramp up. We would then hire or contract with a property manager that is separate, that is really just focused on the care and upkeep of the properties. That would include the on-site staff, although the housing administrator could serve in the capacity of on-site staff for, I would expect that they would be on-site for some of the time that they're doing work with us. Going this contracted route would allow us flexibility to really do a deep dive of looking at what makes the most sense for this organization moving forward, for how we, both the Housing Authority and the city, want to use and leverage the development arm of the Housing Authority that you saw, that they were trying to do, perhaps unsuccessfully, with the previous administration, but it is a powerful way of developing affordable housing. And so I don't want to take that away from our toolkit, so to speak, without knowing really what we want to do and how we want to structure this moving forward. So this is basically going to buy us some time to figure out where we want to go, to allow us to get our housing strategy in place for the city of Kyle, which you guys will be an integral part of and informer of, and still continue to make sure that the residents are taken care of, and get us perhaps a little bit more confidence in how things are being handled, behind the curtain on a day-to-day basis. So that's going to be my recommendation. Where I would go with this, super simple, research and more research. I do not think for this kind of an agreement, I do not think we have to do a solicitation because it is a professional service and because it would be exempt. We might, what I would probably do is identify a handful of firms that I think could do this kind of work and ask for, a proposal for what we would need, and do a little bit of an evaluation, and then bring a recommendation back to you guys to award a contract. Ideally at the September meeting, if everything moves swiftly, that would be my...
Sorry.
The train is moving.
Finally.
Oh, it's a different train. Okay. I was very
It
excited.
doesn't look to me
It's
to be.
still there.
It's still there. Oh my. Okay. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And that's what I wanted to get y'all's perspective on. This, I think, because we would structure the contract with the housing administrator, would be flexible enough that you're not going to be locked in for forever. But it will give us at least the ability to be measured in how we make decisions and not rush into anything, which is really my biggest concern. I want to get things stabilized without closing doors. Part of those conversations, honestly, are going to include talking to HUD about they're encouraging us to reposition Charles Young and take it out of the public housing space into something more like project-based rental assistance, like
Now
what we
it's
have with Pete Dressen or with Section 8. So we're going to learn more about that. We were hoping to have that meeting already this week on Monday, but our HUD rep had to cancel, and so we moved that to next week. So I just want to learn more about the different options that we have available to us and really have time to take a measured approach. But I can't do that without bringing in someone like a housing administrator to help me. So that's my recommendation.
Okay.
The property manager, I thought Kim, or I'm sorry, what's her?
Talicia,
Talicia, I know.
who
the
also
residents
said to call her Kim, which is very not the same.
Yes. What exactly is her?
She's the on-site staff.
Okay, so she would stay.
I mean,
if
right
that
now she's
were-
an employee of AMP. So she was an employee of MDP. There's a lot of acronyms, and I'm sorry about that. I think MDP was making a difference in property management or something like that. They let her go before you guys had even taken any action on suspending the contract. AMP, which is Apartment Management Services, apartment asset management professionals. So many acronyms. They picked her up as an employee of them to continue to serve in the same capacity as the on-site staff. But the property management is bigger than that. It's the maintenance staff and, people that are going to come in and clean up and fix the things and do all of that. So it's part of the on-site person who's working there, but there's a bigger component there.
Okay.
So what we need to vote on this tonight is what?
Well, it's not really structured as, it's just structured as you guys providing me feedback, because there's not really anything to vote on because we don't have a contract in front of you.
Okay.
It's just, do you guys agree with this as an approach? And if it seems reasonable, I'll continue moving forward. If you have concerns about it, or you would like to move forward with, I guess the alternative would be just hiring someone who's basically like Steve and MDP that is both the executive director and the property manager and the on-site staff. That's a different animal. But really, it's up to y'all to make that. This is just my professional recommendation.
I think it's a good approach, so we're not overcorrecting, because I've been thinking about it since we convened in July of, there's opportunity here, but just how do you do it right?
Yeah.
And that's difficult if you're feeling a time crunch or whatever, so I think this is a good approach.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, thank you for taking the time, all of y'all for taking the time. I think that housing administrator is a vital, critical role and position that's needed. We need all the help that we can get. So I feel if we get somebody that has deep knowledge on this and experience, which you said it was like an outside agency that you'd hire through, and just to kind of get the feel for it and eventually just kind of space their time, I think that would help us out a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I will proceed.
please do.
Thank
Go
you.
and conquer.
I think the last item you have is executive session, because there is one item that we want to update you on, and the chair has a script to read.
The Kyle Housing Authority Board will now go into executive session to discuss Agenda Item 7A in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 551.071. All right, I call this meeting back to order. There was no action taken in executive session, and there will be no actions made from that as well. And we are ready to adjourn. Do I need to give the time? 7:54? We are adjourned.